All right, hello everybody. Today on the Jack Roberts Show, we have a very special guest. Um, we have Ambassador Christopher Landau on the show. I'm very excited to ask him a few questions. Welcome, Ambassador Landau.
Thanks, Jack. It's wonderful to be here. Nice to see you again.
All right. So my first question for you is, what was your childhood like with your father being a diplomat?
So you're right. My dad was a diplomat, a career foreign service officer. I was born in Spain, and then we left when I was just a baby. So I really didn't learn any Spanish at that point. We moved to Canada for a year, and then to Washington, where my dad was in the State Department for 6 years. And then when I was 8 years old, we moved to South America when my dad became ambassador to Paraguay. And my parents then stayed in South America for the next 13 straight years. And they were there all the way through the time I graduated from college. And for me, growing up in that part of the world was just an incredible experience, growing up abroad. The first of all, you learn a language, another language. We were 5 years in Paraguay, which is a pretty remote country, not very well known in the United States, but a very family-friendly country. Asunción, the city I grew up in, had about 500,000 people, and we had a very tight-knit American community there. The embassy community was very tight-knit, so there was all kinds of community events. And in a lot of ways, I think it was a more friendly post than Mexico City, where I just came from now, which is such a big city. It's the biggest city in North America, and there's so much going on. Sometimes it's just like being in a small town versus the big city. There's a lot to be said for growing up in a place where there are just closer human connections. And so for me, it was really a kind of a special treat growing up abroad and just learning about other cultures and really living them. I think, one of the things that made me effective as ambassador to Mexico was that I had a good frame of cultural references with Mexicans, because I grew up watching a lot of TV shows that Mexicans of my day were watching at the time. And so, I spoke the language pretty colloquially. I speak it pretty colloquially. And I think that really just helped a lot. So I think it gives you a lot of benefits to grow up in a diplomatic family. There's also trade-offs. I mean, you have to move every few years. As I said, I was lucky we were 5 years in one place in Paraguay. A lot of families nowadays are moving every 2 or 3 years. That can be very disorienting, especially for the kids, and especially if you're moving between different parts of the world where there are different cultures and different languages. And you don't have that much control over your future and your life. That's kind of the excitement of the Foreign Service, but it can also be the dark side. And I think it's hard on some families. I think either kids turn out like me and kind of always have that wanderlust in them and just love to travel and experience different cultures, or they go the exact opposite route and never want to leave the United States again, put down deep roots. But as you know, we've been here in the Washington area for a long time, many years before moving to Mexico. My kids really never knew any other house than the house that they grew up in Chevy Chase. And I thought it was a great opportunity to give them a little taste of the life I had growing up. And I think it was a real eye-opener for them, and just it helps you expand your horizons to see how other people live and think. And so, it was a great experience for me.
Yeah, absolutely. What was it like going to school in a foreign country as a young kid?
Yeah, again, it was a great experience. It has its challenges. I was lucky. There was actually a very good American school in Paraguay, of all places. And so about half my classes were in English and the other half were in Spanish. Again, I think when you're that age, I was 8 years old, you pick up a language so quickly. You're just like a sponge. And I don't even really remember learning Spanish. And I speak it to this day, 50 years later, without an accent, because I learned it as a kid. And so I had a mixture of friends at school. I'd say my closest friends were probably Americans, but there was a good mix also of Paraguayans at the school, and we had very good teachers. So I actually was very lucky. I think just as states or any place, schools vary, and a little bit it's the luck of the draw, who you get as teachers. And but I felt I got a very good education down there, not only in kind of typical classroom learning, but again, in just kind of cultural learning and broadening your horizons.
Yeah, absolutely. Was it mostly American kids from the embassy at the school, or were there any Paraguayan kids in the class?
It was about half and half, which I think is actually a good
Yeah.
mix.
Hmm.
Because if you to be an American school, I think you should have a critical mass of Americans. It's one of the challenges actually for the American school in Mexico City, which both of my own kids attended for a semester at the beginning of last year. Nat was in his last semester of senior year, and he still graduated from his school here in Washington, but we made arrangements for him to take kind of a semester abroad for his last semester. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit during the semester, but the even though there's a lot more Americans in Mexico City than there are in a place like Paraguay, the American school in Mexico is, I'd say, more like 80% Mexican. And so I
Wow.
think it loses its character as a school that really feels American. I mean, mostly in the hallways you hear Spanish spoken, and
Yeah.
I think that 50-50 balance is probably somewhere ideal, or maybe a mix. So when you have Americans, the host country people, and people from third countries, like other diplomatic kids. But that's one of the things that Nat actually noticed is that the Americans and the Mexicans at this school were very segregated. And
Wow.
after class, the Americans would be on this side of the playground, or the blacktop, and the Mexicans on the other side. And after a day or two, he kind of walked across the blacktop from the Americans to go over to the Mexicans. He said, "Look, we're living in Mexico. I've met Americans my whole life. I know plenty of Americans, but I really want to get to meet some Mexican kids and have some Mexican friends." And I think they really appreciated that gesture, and really, I think he made some lifetime friends down there.
Definitely. Yeah. I had a similar experience at Cardigan Mountain School up in New Hampshire. We had a lot of students from Mexico, and they at first were like all hanging out with their Mexican friends and like just speaking Spanish around each other. But then eventually, like everyone just sort of like came together, and we were all friends, and you could hardly tell the difference, like because the friend groups were so integrated. It was really cool to see.
That's great. Well, it's a real tradition in Mexico. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I met in Mexico, successful people in Mexico who said, "Yeah, I went to boarding school in the
Hmm.
States, sometimes just for a year, sometimes for all of high school, let's say." And it's one of the things that as ambassador I tried to promote educational exchanges between the countries. Even though we're neighbors, we're number 10 both ways in terms of Mexicans studying in the United States and in terms of Americans studying in Mexico.
Mm.
And I think that we should definitely be in the top 3 for each other, given how how close we are and how integrated in a lot of ways our economies
Definitely.
and societies and cultures have become. So it was something that I worked hard to promote and to protect once the pandemic started, to keep to make sure those students had visas to continue their studies.
Absolutely, yeah. What attracted you to practicing law?
You know, I, I actually thought originally that I wanted to follow my father's footsteps in the Foreign Service. Again, as I said, I kind of caught the bug of
Yeah,
liking moving
absolutely.
abroad. And so that's where I thought I was going all through college. I focused on Latin America. I got a certificate in Latin American studies. I took a lot of my courses in Spanish. And my dad really dissuaded me from going to the Foreign Service, at least right away. He said, and I think he was right, that it's good to get a professional degree so you always have that career or that skill set to fall back on. And so, he encouraged me to go to law school to kind of learn critical thinking and analysis. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoy the intellectual challenges of that. I enjoy the problem solving nature of that. I think the law is it's a very challenging, intellectually challenging question that gave me a lot of fulfillment and enjoyment. And, it's nice to try to, help people or companies or, any entity achieve, be able to have their rights respected. And if something is done wrong to someone, to help them out. And, I got a lot of pleasure from that.
Well, in your law career, did you prefer arguing in front of the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court?
Yeah, as your question implies, I was an appellate lawyer, so my practice focused on issues at the appellate level, which is obviously taking an issue that's already been decided in the trial court, and really tends to focus on the legal questions, and a lot of the issues are decided in the courts of appeals. A very small number get to the Supreme Court, as you know, maybe 75 or 80 nowadays. I think that's what it was at least a few years ago. And I think the Supreme Court is a great court for many reasons, but one, there's a real focus on all of the cases. I mean, you can't really compare the docket of the Supreme Court, which they get to pick and is very, very small, to the docket of the Court of Appeals. When I was arguing a case in the Court of Appeals, they're hearing, 7 or 8 other cases in that same session, the same day. Whereas in the Supreme Court, typically it's 1 or 2 cases, and an argument day. And, sometimes more, depending on the day, but never more than 4 in a day. That's the maximum in the Supreme Court. I think that's even rare. So that means the justices are much more focused on a question. It's kind of like everybody has brought their best arguments forward, and that's nice. And in the Supreme Court, the justices can kind of, I think it makes sense for them to think about a lot of these legal issues from first principles. So what is the right or wrong answer? Whereas in the Court of Appeals, they're typically, they're constrained by the Supreme Court. They don't get the luxury really of thinking what's the right answer. They're basically saying, what is the law as established by the Supreme Court? I mean, at least in those areas, which is, most of the areas, there's, if not, direct guidance, some guidance from the Supreme Court, and it's a question of applying that. I like the idea that in the Supreme Court, I mean, you're still guided by precedent, but I think the justices have more freedom to kind of think about whether or not these precedents make sense, and even if they follow them, they might want to narrow them here or recharacterize them. And I think there is an attempt to take it to the next level in terms of analysis, and I really enjoyed that as a lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the most fun thing about being ambassador to Mexico?
Oh boy, it was let me just say, it was a wonderful job. It was the best year and a half of my life, and it was such a privilege, really, to represent the United States in a country where the United States looms very large, historically, economically, culturally, socially. There are few people in Mexico who don't have some kind of ties to the United States. And, it was, I think the most fun was just getting to meet and talk to a broad range of different people. I mean, kind of just following up on your previous question, as an appellate lawyer, it's a pretty academic job. I used to get in the office in the morning, and I would go in my office and, boot up my computer and shut the door. And basically, I would just sit there at my desk reading and writing most of the day. I mean, sometimes people would pop in or out, but, it was a pretty monkish existence, I would say. Whereas being an ambassador was pretty much the polar opposite. Yeah. I didn't really write anything. I didn't have a chance to read much. It was typically, bullet points or, just summaries on my way to meetings. And, it was just working very different muscles. And for me, that was a lot of fun, just to connect with people again. I traveled a lot throughout Mexico. It's a huge country. If you were to overlay a map of Mexico and a map of the United States, the upper northwest corner would be somewhere in Montana, and
Yeah.
the southeast corner would be down by, Savannah, Georgia, or Charleston, South Carolina. We
Yep.
cover that much of our country. And, like our country, it has very different geographical areas with just very different people. Big divisions there between the north of the country and the south of the country. And I just like traveling around the country. One of the things as an ambassador, you get a lot of doors to meet all kinds of interesting and for me, it was a real privilege. I got to be very active on social media, which again was kind of a surprise, not something that I did as a lawyer. And, I wound up taking the ambassador's official account, from somewhere like 25,000 followers when I got there to over 280,000 when I left. And, it was just, it was mostly pretty light stuff. I mean, I think the stuff that I saw tended to resonate with people. It was more kind of, expressing my appreciation for of different aspects of Mexican culture. People really enjoyed that. I think people like having, kind of seeing their country through a foreigner's eyes. And, I just got a big kick out of those relationships that I formed in Mexico. I think I formed some of the, some friendships that I'll keep for life. So I'd say, meeting all those people was definitely the most fun thing that I did on the job.
That's awesome. What was your biggest challenge on the job, would you say?
I'd say my biggest challenge was security cooperation between our two countries, particularly on the counter-narcotics front. Absolutely. That's very difficult. We've been working together for decades now to try to limit the flow of illegal drugs into the United States. The problem has gotten a lot worse in recent years as opioids and fentanyl have been pouring across the border. And, that was just a big challenge. And I felt we were usually talking past each other. And, one of the challenges is that both Mexico and the United States have big bureaucracies. They're both federal republics. So you have federal authorities, you have state and local authorities to coordinate. You have different entities within the federal governments with different agendas, and we had some pretty tough circumstances when I was there. I mean, the Mexican police or military tried to capture one of El Chapo's sons early during my tenure there, and wound up releasing him because the drug cartels basically outgunned the Mexican police. It was a very dramatic situation. Then, the drug cartels murdered an American family, 9 people, including I think 5 or 6 children. Some very difficult times, and I wish that I had been able to accomplish more concrete on that front. I mean, that was the front that I always thought was the most challenging, and just a sort of constant frustration to me. And most of the different elements of bureaucracy in Mexico and in the United States, but it's an issue that I really am very passionate about, and I hope to keep up with that.
Yeah, absolutely. On a little bit of a lighter note, in all of your extensive travels, what are your top 3 favorite places to visit?
Well, let me just limit that to Mexico for ease of reference, because actually I do think that not enough Americans really know Mexico, and I think, and I say the same thing in Mexico of the United States. I think our countries, even though we're neighbors, with so much to link us historically and in terms of personal ties, we don't know each other's countries very well. I mean, I think when Americans go to Mexico or think of Mexico, they often think of, maybe Cancun or Puerto Vallarta or Tijuana. But, that's not the real Mexico. So I really encourage Americans to think about, traveling to Mexico and experiencing some different sides of the country. One of the things that I really loved was experiencing the tradition of the Day of the Dead there, which is right before Halloween. And, you've probably seen the sugar skulls they do. I mean, they have a
Yep.
belief.
Yep.
It isn't just a promotional or marketing tool. I mean, it
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
is something that you see in their culture, that the dead will come back, and you put up an altar for your dead and your family, which is a tradition that we took up there, and it's a lovely tradition. And there's parts of Mexico where you go to the cemetery, where people spend all night at the cemetery that evening with their loved ones, praying and really visiting with their loved ones. To me, those kind of cultural tourism experiences are the most interesting. And in Mexico City, I don't know if you've ever seen the James Bond movie
Yeah.
Spectre, but the
Mhm.
opening scene is shot in Mexico City at this
Yep.
kind of Day of the Dead parade, which actually did not exist before the movie. But they did this parade for the movie, and then they said, "Hey, this is actually a great idea." And so they created the parade in real life then, after the movie, and they invited me to the parade in 2019, and it was just an incredible experience for me. I mean, all of the big floats and the skeletons,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I was right there in the main plaza of Mexico City, and I just had to pinch myself sometimes and say like, wow, I mean, this, you're really here in in the heart of Mexico City watching this parade. That kind of just kind of a second thing. I just think Mexico City is a place that most Americans don't know, but is a great tourist destination. It's very close. It's maybe like 4 hours from Washington, let's
Wow.
say, on a stop flight. And Mexico used to extend all the way from what's now Costa Rica all the way up to Oregon.
Mhm.
It was the Spanish viceroyalty of New Spain,
Yeah.
and the capital city, Mexico City, was founded on the old Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, which was city on a lake. And Mexico City it has an incredible physical location. The climate is perfect. It's
Mhm.
always a spring-like weather. It never gets very hot. In fact, it gets quite cool in the evenings. You have to wear, have a heater or wear a sweater at night for a lot of the year. And they're just great parks, restaurants, museums. It's the largest city in North America, and I think it's something that more Americans should experience it. And then I just like to say that I always, and my family, we always enjoyed going to the markets in Mexico. I mean, here in the United States, we kind of think all our food comes from the supermarket. It's all in plastic wrapping. And,
Yeah.
in Mexico, you get to go to, where there's fresh food. It's kind of like there are huge farmers markets. And it's always goes with the season. So you see all kinds of exotic fruits and vegetables, which are super fresh and delicious. And our favorite was the Mercado de Jamaica, or the Jamaica market in Mexico City. Jamaica means hibiscus, and that's the flower that they use down there to make a drink or a tea. And but that also they sell fruits and vegetables there, but they also sell flowers. And so my wife used to go and buy bunches of birds of or other flowers, and incredibly inexpensive. Maybe you get 24 long stalks of bird of paradise for a handful of dollars, maybe $3 to $5.
Wow. Wow.
And so you can just here I think fresh flowers are such a luxury, whereas
Yeah.
they're such a staple. And it's things like that are kind of fun. They also sell piñatas at that market. So we had huge piñatas at home. It's kind of funny. We put a piñata on top of the ambassador's official limousine and drove it across to come back from the market to
That's
us.
awesome.
And I mean, we tried to take advantage of the opportunities to really get into the culture and enjoy things that were different than what we have here at home. There certainly are things. There are modern malls in Mexico City and
Absolutely.
supermarkets and all that. But for us, we have that here. We tried to take advantage and explore the things that were a little bit different.
Mhm.
And it was really a great experience. And I certainly encourage you or your listeners to this podcast to think about Mexico and
Absolutely.
try to go beyond the stereotypes and think of it as as kind of an interesting destination that's very close, but in a lot of ways very foreign and exotic.
Yeah, it's absolutely on my list of places to go. I have a lot of friends there, and I'd love to go visit them. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ambassador Landau. This has just been great. I really, really appreciate you taking the time.
Jack, it's my pleasure. It's nice to see you all grown up, and you're very professional. I enjoyed the interview, and I wish you continued good luck in college. Take care.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Yeah. Bye now.
Bye.